One would be hard-pressed to find anything remotely resembling that level of journalistic scrutiny or outrage directed at the Trump White House. This stark disparity makes it utterly impossible for critics to ever again deny the existence of a pervasive, deeply entrenched double standard. Indeed, this double standard, glaringly apparent in contemporary media coverage, doesn't merely tolerate, it actively favors what can only be described as Trump madness, the chaotic pronouncements, the often unconventional policy shifts, the inflammatory rhetoric. It not only accepts but often amplifies this perceived erraticism. In stark contrast, consider the treatment of a Democratic president. Should he misspeak even a single word in a complex sentence, he is afforded no opportunity for clarification, no grace period for correction. Instead, he is instantly, unmercifully judged, often deemed too decrepit or mentally unfit for the rigorous demands of the presidency. This insidious double standard isn't merely a fleeting phenomenon. It is a fundamental pillar that will undoubtedly underpin the media's approach to the current administration for the entirety of its remaining 3 years. The journalistic establishment, it seems, has lost its moral compass, adrift in a sea of selective outrage and partisan allegiance. One can only hold out a faint hope that they might someday rediscover the path to objective reporting. Now, turning our gaze to the pantheon of political appointments, one must inevitably ponder the question of who might hold the unenviable title of the most truly inept, the single stupidest member of any administration, specifically, the Trump cabinet. Surprisingly, the immediate thought might leap to Robert Kennedy Jr., a figure whose entire public persona suggests a man who, it could be argued, has yet to experience a truly insightful or intelligent moment in his adult life. Acknowledging his publicly documented past struggles, one might assert that a youth reportedly consumed by daily heroin addiction throughout his high school, college, and even law school years hardly provided fertile ground for academic or intellectual growth, leaving him, by many accounts, a functional ignoramus on the very subjects he so brazenly claims expertise over. Indeed, some might contend that Robert Kennedy Jr., through his promotion of dangerous conspiracy theories and misinformation, especially in areas of public health, positions himself as perhaps the most perilous cabinet member in American history, capable of inadvertently or otherwise contributing to the demise of more citizens than any predecessor. Yet, astonishingly, he is not the one we are discussing as the stupidest. No, that dubious honor, that crown of the most laughably incompetent, the most utterly clownish figure within the cabinet, falls to a man who, with a breathtaking display of political opportunism, initially threw his unequivocal support behind Hillary Clinton for president in 2016. Then, in a stark and utterly damning testament to the depth, or rather the shallowness, of his personal integrity and convictions, he executed an immediate, almost acrobatic volte-face, pledging his unwavering loyalty to Donald Trump the very moment Trump's victory was cemented. This brings us to Howard Lutnick, who, despite his impressive public profile indicating a degree in economics from Haverford College, a major that one might assume confers a fundamental understanding of global trade, has managed, in the eyes of many, to earn the distinction of being the most profoundly inept, the stupidest Commerce Secretary in the annals of American history. His own words, uttered in a recent interview with the New York Post just yesterday, serve as a damning self-indictment. Recounting his experience on the campaign trail, Lutnick, with almost childlike wonder, proclaimed, "I think the most important thing we did is we designed his tariff policy together. We talked through, he taught me, I tell you what, he taught me everything about tariffs. We designed the tariff policy together. And we talked about his economic policy. I didn't really understand tariffs before I met Donald Trump. I mean, you know, you're a New York businessman. It's not really a world. And then once I started talking to him about it, I understood it."
10 astonishing confessions Bégard-Bélieff.
One would be hard-pressed to find a high school government student, let alone an undergraduate economics major, who doesn't grasp the basic concept of tariffs. It stands as one of the most elementary foundational principles in economic policy, universally understood by economists to be, at their core, nothing more than consumption taxes, or sales taxes, levied on imported goods. Yet, here we have the purported Commerce Secretary, a man ostensibly at the zenith of economic policy-making, proudly confessing that he acquired his rudimentary understanding of tariffs from an individual, Donald Trump, who has repeatedly, and often publicly, articulated some of the most economically illiterate and nonsensical pronouncements ever uttered on the subject. The sheer audacity of such a statement, given his professional background, speaks volumes. Furthermore, Lutnick's every public utterance, every comment, serves as a glaring testament to his almost pathological eagerness to ingratiate himself with Donald Trump. He doesn't merely suck up, he engages in an almost theatrical slavish devotion, outcompeting every other eager supplicant in the Trump orbit. No one, absolutely no one, even approaches his level of zealous, almost fawning subservience. Beyond this sycophancy, he consistently, and with remarkable predictability, exposes himself as utterly unprepared for the gravity of his role, revealing a childlike perspective profoundly out of place in a room filled with seasoned adults entrusted with the nation's governance. He recounts, with almost giddy excitement, how Trump lets me stay for the Joint Chiefs of Staff coming. Right. This is like the coolest thing ever.
Coolest thing ever.
Such a remark, reflecting a schoolboy's wonder at being allowed to observe rather than actively participate, underscores a startling immaturity, a complete lack of understanding regarding the decorum and serious responsibilities inherent in his cabinet position. It paints a vivid picture of a man more concerned with proximity to power than with exercising it thoughtfully or effectively. And as if to further cement his reputation for unparalleled ineptitude, Lutnick commenced that same interview in a manner so breathtakingly foolish, so utterly devoid of discretion, that it defies belief, particularly for someone holding such a high-profile public office. He literally began by divulging his exact home address in New York City, the specific street and number, and then, with an almost oblivious candor, proceeded to identify his former next-door neighbor as none other than Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump's notoriously close confidant, who, of course, was an infamous convicted sex trafficker of children. The sheer recklessness of revealing such personal information, combined with the profound political insensitivity of publicly linking himself, however tangentially, to a figure as reviled as Epstein, especially given the persistent questions surrounding Trump's own relationship with the predator, constitutes a masterclass in spectacularly bad judgment. Intriguingly, Lutnick now, at least in this retrospective recounting, asserts he possessed remarkably astute instincts regarding Jeffrey Epstein, and consequently, exhibited a profoundly different reaction to the notorious financier than his friend Donald Trump had. He details a neighborly invitation from 2005, shortly after he moved in. Jeffrey Epstein is arrested and like a wait, I think something like that, a curious chronological inaccuracy that immediately raises an eyebrow, given Epstein's first public arrest for sex crimes was 2006. Nevertheless, Lutnick recounts, so knock on the door, his assistant, or like a salary says, Mr. Epstein, your neighbor would like to invite you over for coffee. So he and his wife, innocently, took the 7 steps across their shared wall in New York City, for what they anticipated would be a cordial neighborly chat. After coffee, Epstein, ever the ostentatious host, offered a tour. Lutnick describes a super big, really wide house, and then the chilling reveal, and he opens the doors and there's a massage table in the middle of the room and candles all around and stuff. Lutnick, with what he humorously labels very insightful cutting questions, inquired, massage table in the middle of your house? How often you have a massage? Epstein's chillingly casual reply, every day. Then, with a disconcertingly predatory proximity, Epstein leaned in and whispered, and the right kind of massage. The scene, pregnant with sinister undertones, immediately prompted Lutnick and his wife to exchange a knowing, horrified glance. I'm sorry, they announced, we have to go. And with that they left, deciding within the mere 6 or 8 steps back to their own home that they would never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. This visceral, immediate, and unequivocal rejection, rooted in a profound sense of revulsion, strikes most observers as an entirely reasonable, indeed commendable, human reaction to the manifest creepiness of Jeffrey Epstein. Yet, the historical record, particularly in the form of infamous video footage, starkly reminds us that Donald Trump, by contrast, harbored precisely the opposite sentiment towards Jeffrey Epstein. Trump, it is painfully clear, relished the opportunity to literally dance with Epstein at parties, eagerly seeking out his company at every turn. The stark chasm between Howard Lutnick's profound disdain and Donald Trump's apparent camaraderie with Jeffrey Epstein is. The sentiment harbored by many of New York's wealthiest elite towards Donald Trump was one of utter contempt. They wanted absolutely no association, no contact whatsoever, with that individual, that person they so dismissively called that Bulgarian, clearly referring to Jeffrey Epstein, whom they considered beyond the pale truly gross, to borrow Howard Lutnick's very own descriptor. This brings us to the profound yet perpetually unasked question that the White House press corps will likely never pose directly to Donald Trump. If Howard Lutnick found Jeffrey Epstein so utterly gross the moment their paths crossed, why then did you maintain such a close friendship with him for a staggering 10 years? This pivotal question will never emanate from the mouth of any White House press corps member, nor indeed from anyone else granted the rare privilege of an interview with Donald Trump. Why? Because Trump meticulously selects his interviewers, carefully curating a roster of individuals who are guaranteed not to broach such inconvenient truths or uncomfortable inquiries. And then there's Howard Lutnick himself. A prominent figure, the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, who was under no obligation to speak about any of this. Yet, in what can only be described as a moment of astounding imprudence, he revealed far more about Jeffrey Epstein than anyone anticipated. He essentially posited a rhetorical challenge. How could all these other influential individuals, these pillars of society, simply hang around Epstein and utterly fail to perceive what Lutnick himself supposedly saw from the very first encounter? Or was it, perhaps, that they did see it, but simply chose to willfully ignore it? The chilling conclusion Lutnick implies, and indeed states, is that no, they participated. That was Epstein's modus operandi, wasn't it? Get a massage, get a massage. And it's an open secret, a chilling assumption, that whatever transpired within those massage rooms was meticulously captured on video. This man, Jeffrey Epstein, was arguably the most prolific and cunning blackmailer of his era, leveraging compromising footage to extort and control powerful individuals. That, fundamentally, was the source of his immense, illicit wealth. So this begs the pressing question: what became of those infamous videos? Why in this era is there such a striking paucity of information surrounding them, especially when, by all accounts, Donald Trump's allies and appointees are at the helm of both the FBI and the Department of Justice? One can only speculate, but a pervasive assumption suggests that back then, a clandestine trade occurred. Those highly incriminating videos were likely exchanged for that shockingly lenient 18-month sentence, a deal that incredibly allowed Epstein the freedom to have visitors and even leave jail for daily office visits. Let's not forget, this was a known serial sex offender. How could such an egregious individual secure an 18-month sentence and enjoy such unprecedented privileges, going to his office during the day, entertaining visitors, unless there was, unequivocally, a deeply compromising trade involved? While I possess no definitive knowledge, my strong conjecture remains: there was an exchange for those videos, precisely because powerful, prominent individuals were undoubtedly featured on them. One might ask, what did he know about this whole sordid affair? He, of course, knows the narrative, the underlying story. But beyond that, beyond the fact that I was the one who allegedly done with the guy, the details remain elusive. Perhaps he would have been interested in that specific anecdote, but it's merely one thread in a vast tapestry of intrigue. Now, did Donald Trump share Lutnick's revulsion for Epstein? When confronted with such questions, the typical dismissive response is, "I don't speak to him about these kinds of things. These are merely distractions." And indeed, they are distractions, aren't they? One can almost feel the moment Lutnick, in his unguarded candor, realized the colossal error he made by delving so deeply into the Jeffrey Epstein saga. The moment that New York Post reporter pivoted to ask, "Did Donald Trump agree with your assessment of Epstein as gross?" That was the precise instant Lutnick comprehended the magnitude of his misstep. Consider the stark absurdity. Howard Lutnick, who lived literally next door to Jeffrey Epstein, now claims he has never discussed Jeffrey Epstein with Donald Trump. The foolish question posed by the New York Post reporter was whether Trump felt the same way about Epstein. To which Lutnick lamely replied, "I don't speak to him about that." It seems the New York Post reporter, in her journalistic duties, had apparently neglected to read a single article, to view a single piece of widely disseminated footage concerning Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Had she would have seen the infamous video of Donald Trump gleefully dancing with Jeffrey Epstein, witnessed his palpable expressions of affinity for Epstein captured right there on film, seen them hanging out, even hugging. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Donald Trump's reaction to Jeffrey Epstein was in stark, undeniable contrast to the disdainful reaction Howard Lutnick now claims he felt. Howard Lutnick's recent display of intellectual clumsiness has, inadvertently, exacerbated Donald Trump's most enduring political predicament, the intractable Jeffrey Epstein fire, which stubbornly continues to smolder and occasionally erupt, day after day, despite every desperate, dramatic distraction Donald Trump attempts to ignite to extinguish it. Now, Democrats on the House Oversight Committee are keenly interested. They want to compel testimony from Howard Lutnick, seeking to uncover precisely what he knew about Jeffrey Epstein and, crucially, what he observed within the confines of Jeffrey Epstein's home. While there is no definitive public evidence that Jeffrey Epstein manufactured or traded blackmail videos in exchange for that scandalously light sentence, one must ponder, could such damning evidence be secreted away within the labyrinthine Epstein files? Howard Lutnick, it seems, certainly believes so. The sheer irony, then, is that an individual who, by some accounts, strives to ingratiate himself with Donald Trump has just inadvertently deepened Trump's most perilous political quagmire. This entire convoluted affair takes on another layer of political intrigue with the impending appearance of California Senator Adam Schiff, a figure whom Donald Trump has repeatedly, and without any substantive legal basis, expressed a desire to prosecute. It sounds remarkably as if an unwittingly problematic associate of Donald Trump, the very same individual who once resided next door to Jeffrey Epstein, possesses critically important information that he absolutely should be sharing with the congressional committees rigorously investigating Donald Trump's notorious old friend, the convicted sex trafficker and rapist of children Jeffrey Epstein. Let's revisit the core of Epstein's sinister enterprise, his well-documented modus operandi. Get a massage, get a massage. And what transpired in those massage rooms, one can only assume, was meticulously recorded on video. This individual, Epstein, was arguably the greatest blackmailer in history, preying on people's darkest secrets to accumulate his vast fortune. So the question screams for an answer: what became of those videos? Why is there such a profound scarcity of information surrounding them, particularly when Donald Trump's hand-picked allies are at the helm of both the FBI and the Department of Justice? My unwavering assumption remains: a clandestine trade took place, those videos exchanged for that shockingly lenient 18-month sentence, which allowed him unprecedented privileges like daily office visits and the ability to entertain visitors while supposedly incarcerated. A serial sex offender granted such freedom? It must have been a trade. Joining our discussion tonight, to shed more light on these unsettling revelations, is Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. As a distinguished member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he stands as one of the prominent figures Donald Trump has publicly, and unjustifiably, ordered his Justice Department to prosecute. Senator Schiff, we just heard Howard Lutnick's astonishing comments regarding Epstein, describing him as the greatest blackmailer ever, asserting that this was the very source of his illicit wealth. It certainly appears Lutnick possesses an unsettlingly intimate knowledge of how Jeffrey Epstein's dark empire truly operated. Senator Schiff, it certainly seems that Lutnick holds significant information. And I believe, emphatically, that he should be compelled to come forward and testify before Congress. What truly struck me, Lawrence, about this entire narrative, is the stark contrast it presents. Because when Kash Patel, the former FBI director under Trump, recently testified, he vehemently insisted that there was absolutely no evidence whatsoever that Jeffrey Epstein had engaged in sex trafficking or blackmail operations involving videos. In an astonishing and deeply unsettling rhetorical maneuver, the assertion has been put forth, perhaps as a desperate attempt at deflection or defense, that one's interactions concerning women were with anyone other than Jeffrey Epstein. What does it signify truly, to draw such a stark, almost perverse line in the sand, invoking the name now synonymous with one of the most heinous international sex trafficking scandals. It's a chilling reminder of the specter of past associations and the moral abyss Epstein represented. To frame an argument or a denial by contrasting oneself with a convicted pedophile and alleged procurer is not merely an exercise in deflection. It's a profound commentary on the perceived severity of the situation being addressed, or perhaps, a miscalculation of how such a comparison would land with a public acutely aware of Epstein's depravities.
It força Stark, inconfortable l'ensepone paste social circlen personal conduct, living en indelible impression.
Yet, this extraordinary statement, laden with its own disturbing implications, only intensifies the palpable tension already evident within the highest echelons of power. It has become stunningly clear that, apparently, the president's own cabinet, the very body entrusted with executing his policies and upholding the integrity of the administration, harbors profound doubts and, indeed, openly doesn't believe the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This isn't merely a policy disagreement. It represents a fundamental fracture in the bedrock of governmental trust and institutional credibility. When the nation's chief law enforcement officer, whose agency is tasked with uncovering facts and enforcing justice, loses the confidence of the very individuals he is meant to serve alongside, what does that signal for the rule of law? Does this not beg the question of who, then, is trusted to discern truth from fabrication? Such an internal schism not only undermines the FBI's crucial mission, but also sends a deeply troubling message to the American public, eroding faith in impartiality and unity of government operations and revealing a breathtaking level of internal dissent that seems to transcend mere political differences.